Hey everyone, so I've been living in New York City for about a year now. I moved last September, so not quite a year, but close to it. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of what it's like to live here now that it's been a decent amount of time. So I wanted to make a video about what you need to know before moving to New York City. This is a video that I would have liked to seen, and I did watch these type of videos before moving here. So just want to add my perspective. So let's get right into it. The biggest pro about New York City for me is the public transportation system. It is great. I mean, you can pretty much get anywhere you want to go across all of the boroughs, or at least the 4 main boroughs. Staten Island is a little bit more challenging because it's further, but you can still get there if you need to. I know people who work at my job commute from Staten Island to work every day. So even Jersey. So the public transportation system in New York is just incredible. You can get anywhere. It's great. It's affordable. For the most part, it runs on time. For the most part, it runs without problems. Of course, there are delays. There are problems. But it's still pretty good, I would say. And I would say it's better than anywhere else in the United States. With the exception of Chicago, they're both great. But New York just covers so many more neighborhoods, so much more space. So it's hard to say that there's a better city in the United States in terms of public transportation. You absolutely don't need a car here. Another thing to know is that the parks are amazing. This is something I didn't really think about too much before I came here, but it's really nice to spend time at the parks here. They're just really relaxing, especially when the weather gets warmer. People are just out there enjoying it, having picnics, reading, exercising. I mean, there's parks everywhere in Brooklyn and Manhattan. I haven't been to other ones in the other boroughs, but I know they probably have parks as well. And the parks are just really nice. It's great to be in a city that just has a lot of parks, and it's really nice to enjoy time at the park. Another thing I really like about New York City is that people are always outside doing something. I mean, whether they're walking, talking with friends, hanging out with friends, exploring the city, there's just always people outside no matter what time of day, no matter what time of night. And it's really nice for me. I really enjoy cities that are busy, that have a lot going on. It never feels like it's dead. So that's something really enjoyable for me. They say it's a city that never sleeps, and I've been to cities that are probably more deserving of that name, to be honest. But New York City is definitely up there. It's a city that's always live, and there's always things going on outside. Another really great thing about New York City is the diversity. I hear a different language in every single conversation when I'm outside. Everywhere I turn, there's a different language. I've lived in the LA metro area, I've lived in San Diego, I've lived in Chicago, I've lived in Michigan. I've never been to a city in the United States that's as diverse as New York City. I've rarely been to cities in the whole world that are as diverse as New York City. And adding on to that diversity comes the diversity of food that you have available to you. There's so much good food in New York City. There's so much diverse food in New York City. Any type of cuisine, I'm sure you can find it here, and it's probably going to be spectacular. Other cities also have great food, like LA, like Chicago, like San Diego, but they don't have as much diversity of the food. So it may be challenging to find a specific cuisine that you're looking for. I guarantee in New York City, it is not. At least comparable to other cities in the United States. And I want to say with certainty, probably more diverse in terms of food compared to any city in the world. I mean, I've traveled quite a bit. I haven't been to another city that has as much diversity in terms of food as New York City, and even just the language, the people, everything. It's really, really unique. Another great thing about New York City, probably obvious if you're watching this video and you're considering moving to New York City or visiting New York City, there's so much to do. There's so many great museums, exhibits, concerts, sporting events. I mean, if you're bored in New York City, or you tell me you don't have something to do in New York City, I really think that you are just a boring person. You wouldn't have anything to do in any city in the world. I mean, there's just so much to do. There's always something going on. If you make half an effort, you can find something to do every weekend, even on weekdays if you wanted to. Believe me, because I'm an introverted person. I've had no shortage of things to go out to do with my friends, events, parties, concerts, sporting events, whatever it is, museums, exhibits. New York City has it all. It really does. Another great thing that I really like about New York City is the opportunities, especially if you're someone who's ambitious, looking to grow your career. Of course, not every industry is here, but for people who are looking for that, there's a lot of opportunities in New York City, And generally they're going to pay more because it's expensive to live in New York City. So the salaries are typically going to be higher, and there's just going to be opportunity. I think really New York City in the United States, and maybe even in the world, is the place where you're going to find the most opportunities. Not just corporate jobs, but in jobs or whatever field or craft you want to put your time and effort in. I think New York City is probably the place to be. Unless you're in the film industry or something like that, maybe LA. The tech industry, it might be better to be in San Francisco or something like that. But generally, for most people, I think New York City is a place to be if you're trying to grow your career. One aspect of New York City that I didn't really have knowledge of before I moved here, that I've learned with experience, is how many great neighborhoods there are in New York City. In each borough, you can find really great neighborhoods that you will like. And that's a really great thing about New York City that I haven't really seen in other cities, is that there isn't one neighborhood or two neighborhoods or five neighborhoods that you have to be in. I mean, there's so many different neighborhoods. I can name a bunch of neighborhoods that I could probably see myself living in different boroughs, you know. So I think that's one thing to consider if you're considering moving to New York City or visiting New York City, is you don't have to be in a particular neighborhood. You can find neighborhoods that you will like in many different boroughs, and that's just a really big plus for New York City. I mean, if you can't afford one neighborhood, there's other neighborhoods that you will like that may be more affordable. Or if this neighborhood's not for you, well, guess what? That borough might have neighborhoods that you will absolutely love. So that's a really big plus that I didn't consider, but as I'm continuing to explore New York City, I'm learning more and more about different neighborhoods, and I'm starting to like them even more. Every single day I like this city more. Weather. Now, this is a little bit of, I will explain later that the weather can be great, it can also be not so great. But one thing on the positive, because we're going through the positive first, is the winter is really not that bad. I came from living in Chicago. I'm originally from California, so you know, I'm not that accustomed to cold weather anyway. I've been accustomed to it over the last couple years, going to grad school in Michigan and then living in Chicago for a couple years, so now I'm fine with cold weather. But the winter is really not brutal at all. It's an easy winter, and I don't think that anybody would have a problem adjusting to this winter, even if you're not from a cold climate. It's really not a brutal winter at all. It's pretty moderate, very easy, and probably gonna need a couple jackets, but nothing crazy. I don't really think you'll need boots. You can probably get away without gloves and beanies, but you know, if you like wearing them, by all means. But really easy winter. This past winter was not bad at all. The previous winters before that, it didn't even snow. So I wouldn't let if you're scared of cold weather, I wouldn't let that prevent you from moving to New York City or visiting New York City. Now, let's get to the cons. First and foremost, I'm sure everybody knows where I'm going with this. New York City is expensive. It is the most expensive city in the world. It is so expensive. And not only is the rent expensive, the food's expensive, and everything is expensive for the most part. But I think this is obvious. Everybody that knows is considering visiting New York City, is considering living in New York City. I'm sure you've heard this. So unless you're living in a vacuum, you know about it being expensive. But of course, I have to mention it. That's the biggest drawback to New York City. Number two, if you like personal space, this is not the city for you. Your room, your apartment, restaurants, bars, clubs, sporting events, on the train, in the bus, you are going to be surrounded by people. You're going to be touching people, crowded. This is not the place if you like personal space. If you do, and you need a big apartment, and you need a lot of space everywhere you go, and you don't like going to restaurants or bars where there's a lot of people, you don't like going on the train or the bus as it is, especially crowded ones, you might want to reconsider, because New York City is a crowded city. It's a crowded city. You will always be around people, and people will always be close to you physically. You will likely be touching on other people all the time. When I take the train in the morning, I kid you not, I probably can't even lift my hands to get something out of my pocket. I can't really move. I can't take my backpack off. If it's on or if it's off, I can't put it on. It's just that many people around you. So if you are a really big person about personal space and 6 feet distance and all of that, you might want to reconsider living in New York. Visiting, it's okay because it'll be temporary, but if you're living, it's just hard to avoid that. Even if you don't live in Manhattan, it's still hard to avoid that. This kind of touches a bit on the financial aspect that I mentioned earlier, but taxes, again, I think people are aware of this. If you're considering living in New York City, you probably know about the tax situation, but it is something to be aware of. You will pay more taxes most likely in New York City than you will, not most likely, you will pay more taxes in New York City than you will in other states, especially if you're coming from Florida, or if you're coming from states that don't have income tax. You will pay high income tax in New York City, and in general, taxes are higher here than other places. That comes with a lot. There are a lot of benefits that I mentioned, the big list that I mentioned beforehand. But that's something to be aware of. You will pay significantly more in taxes, so just be ready for that. Speaking on the weather, I said I would talk about this a little bit because there's pros to the weather, but there's also cons to the weather. It rains so much. I did not realize that at all. Coming from California, coming from Chicago, even Michigan, San Diego, any of those places doesn't really rain often, and not that much. But when it rains here, it rains. Like, it is a storm. It rains hard. If you go outside during the rain, you will get soaked. You need a strong umbrella. The rain sucks. I hate rain, and it rains a lot here, so that's something to be aware of. Second of all, the summers. In Chicago, in Michigan, the summers are very pleasant. I like Midwest summers. In California, they're a bit stronger. I would say New York City summer is more like California. But it's like dry heat, but it's also humid. It's really weird and interesting. But the summer here is like, I don't want to go outside. I mean, the feels like today was like 100 degrees. It's been in the 90s, and we're barely at the beginning of June. So it gets warm here. And I normally like warm weather. I really do. But even I was caught by surprise a little bit to realize how warm it gets. Because a lot of people were complaining about the summer. And I don't know if I just didn't register it, but you know, coming from California, I'm like, whatever. You know, I'm used to it. I like warm climates. All the places I like to travel to are warm climates. But it definitely gets warm in New York City. It gets hot. So bring sunscreen. And if you don't like warm cities, you know, I guess you only have to deal with it during the summer. But something to be aware of. Okay. One other thing that I do have to mention. I mentioned it being busy, packed, crowded. It's also loud. It's one of the loudest cities I've lived in. I mean, especially in Manhattan, but even in the other boroughs, you're going to hear cars, you're going to hear motorcycles, you're going to hear people talking loudly, people talking on the phone, screaming, conversing, people cussing each other out. There's a lot going on in the city, a lot. And it's just very loud. If you're looking for a quiet city, you can find that in certain boroughs, in certain neighborhoods for sure. Some are louder than others, but generally New York is a loud city. Comparative to other cities I've been across the country, New York is the loudest one I've been in, probably, I would say. The loudest one I've lived in for sure. Definitely one of the loudest I visited. And Manhattan is just a lot. It's just really overwhelming. And just reconsider, or just do your research if you're considering moving to New York City and you think you want to live in Manhattan. Another con, this might be obvious if you've ever heard about New York City, but it is dirty. It's so dirty. It's the dirtiest city I've ever been in, by far. It's not even close. I mean, there is literal feces everywhere. It's just kind of ridiculous. I mean, I've seen it on the train, in seats. I've seen it all over the floor. Like, it's everywhere. You have to watch your step. It's the dirtiest city I've ever been in. I think, yeah, it is definitely the dirtiest city I've ever been in, the dirtiest city I've ever lived in. I hate to talk bad about New York City, really, I do, but it's just true, and that's something you should consider if you're thinking about living here and you're like a clean freak or something like that. It's a dirty city, and it's just hard to even avoid that because you're going to be touching things when you go outside. You're going to be sitting places and all of that. So you just have to watch your surroundings. Not that it's unsafe, but it's just dirty. And the topic that a lot of people consider when they're thinking about moving to a new city is dating. All I'm going to say about that is good luck. But that brings us to the end of this video. I really hope that this video was helpful. If it was, consider subscribing, giving this video a thumbs up, leave a comment down below about where you're tuning in from, and if you're considering moving to New York City, or you're considering visiting New York City, or if you have any questions about New York City, I will happily answer if I can help, or about Michigan or Chicago or LA or San Diego or the SoCal area. Any questions about anything, really. Yeah, you can turn on post notifications so you can be notified whenever I drop a new video. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope that this was a helpful video.